Welcome to the Paper 3 Political Ideas revision video on feminism. In this video, we are going to look at why do radical feminists have a different approach to liberal feminists? Looking back on what we've learned about feminism so far, do you think that liberal feminism is the right answer in regards to equality for women? Also think about this question: what criticisms of liberal feminism can you think of? Well, radical feminism often criticises liberal feminism for being too reformist, meaning that they wish to reform society rather than transform it. Radical feminists do not believe that this will solve the problems that are facing women. Our two radical feminists for this paper are Kate Millett and Bell Hooks. Radical feminism is not really one movement, but a series of different perspectives on the problems posed by the patriarchy. They do, however, all have some characteristics in common. They do propose the destruction of the patriarchal society and saying its transformation into a completely new form is the only way that women will be equal. While liberal feminists are more reformist, radical feminists are revolutionary in their outlook, though not normally favouring violent revolution. Radical feminists also stress the importance of female consciousness in both their critique of the patriarchy and their proposals for a new social order. They are mostly known as difference feminists rather than equality feminists. Instead of attempting to ignore the biological and cultural differences between men and women, as liberal feminists do in their pursuit of equality, radical feminists normally stress and celebrate the differences between men and women. We're going to focus on Kate Millett, one of our key thinkers, because there are two types of differences that exist within radical feminism. The first lies in how they analyse the patriarchal society, and the society concerns the way in which they seek to defeat it. And what Millett argues is that women are exploited sexually and economically. This became a common theme amongst radical feminists. In her great work, Sexual Politics, published in 1969, which sent shockwaves through the feminist movement, it was really important because it was a root and branch criticism of the role of men in the patriarchal society. She says that men oppress women in all fields, in the home, in the economy, and in life in general. Their domination is political in nature because it involves the exercise of power. Millett had much to do with the popularisation of the idea of male chauvinism, the tendency for men to exercise and celebrate their power over women. Another key radical feminist is Shula Smith Firestone, and whilst not a key thinker on our paper, she is someone that can be referenced in the exam. In her 1970 publication, The Dialect of Sex, Firestone saw the history of civilization as the dialectic struggle between men and women, in the same way that Marx had seen in history in terms of a dialectic class struggle. The origins of the gender struggle lay in the biological differences between men and women and the traditional bondage which women faced by being confined to life in the home. The patriarchy exists for Firestone because it has always existed, and it always will exist because women are constrained by childbirth and housework, destined to ever be enslaved by men. A final key thinker and radical feminist is Andrea Dworkin. Again, she is not used and referenced in our spec, but is a really important person to consider in your exam work. She is perhaps the most controversial of all modern radical feminists. She campaigned against the sexual oppression of women, and in particular saw pornography as symptomatic of men's view of women as little more than sex objects. The only way this could be combated would be for women to form themselves into lesbian communities. As long as women allow themselves to be sex objects for men, they will never achieve true liberation in her mind. Such feminists such as Kate Millett, Germaine Greer, and Shula Smith Firestone all have in common their stress on the importance of specifically female consciousness on the patriarchy. Women's consciousness on their own inferiority stems partly from their biological role, which appears to be subordinate to that of men, and partly from the view of themselves imposed on them by men. Furthermore, the patriarchy consciously destroys any ideas of potential liberation amongst women. In a major criticism of the limited horizons of the liberal feminists and the self-delusion that women have the potential to liberate themselves. Radical feminists have a number of proposals then on how to combat the patriarchy and to liberate women from its clutches. On the whole, these solutions are based on their perspectives of the nature of patriarchy. Their proposals include the following: the abolition of the nuclear family and its replacement by communal forms of child rearing and living in general. This will naturally remove the male domination of the family. Millett was able to continue this vision with her support for the ideals of socialism. Sexual liberation is critical for many radical feminists, most notably Germaine Greer. By escaping from the limitations of traditional male-female relationships, women are free themselves from male domination and, in Greer's terms, cease to hate themselves. The elimination of biological roles is perhaps the most radical solution of all. Firestone, in particular, celebrates the potential of modern biotechnology to free women from their biological enslavement. Recommending androgyny, the removal of sex differences between men and women, she envisions a world where women no longer need men to reproduce the species. This results in liberation of a fundamental kind. We're going to pause for a moment and do an exam focus. In paper 3, quite often you will be asked to compare liberal and radical feminists against one another. So let's take a look at how you would do that. We're going to argue this particular exam question. To what extent do radical feminists criticise liberal feminists? With reference to feminist thinkers that you have studied, analyse and evaluate the answer to this question. So this is a big 25-mark question. And essentially what this boils down to is, how do radical feminists criticise liberal feminists? The key to this question would be looking at the differences between the two of them. On the screen below, you can see that I have summed up some of the key differences that could form the basis of your paragraphs for an exam question like this. If we start by looking at the liberals, they are more of a reform movement, whereas the radicals are more revolutionary. For liberals, the patriarchy is a modern phenomenon that can be combated through legal and cultural reform, whereas for radical feminists, it has always existed and has deep historical roots. The patriarchy for them has penetrated deep into the male and female consciousness. Whereas liberal feminists believe that if legal and economic equality can be achieved, then women will gain general liberation. Whereas radicals are slightly different on this view. They say that the male and female consciousness must be changed if liberation is to be achieved, not just by using reform. And lastly, women should be free to choose how they conduct their lives and their relationships with men, whereas radical feminists say that it is not sufficient enough to just create freedom for women. Male domination must be destroyed and their consciousness of superiority must be reversed. And some radical feminists, like Firestone, go even further to say that women should not have relationships with men unless on a completely equal footing. What this table will help you with then is it will help you form a basis for your answer for this question. Each bullet point would create a paragraph and then you would compare it against the other form of feminism.